Chapter 1. My wife, Juanita, sat across the breakfast table from me, just as we had for the last 24 years of our married life. It was a Thursday morning in late September, and the leaves of the trees in our backyard had begun to turn various shades of yellow and tan. She was enjoying that view through the window of our breakfast nook, while I read the morning paper. It was a familiar scene in our empty nest for the last 2 years since our youngest daughter got married and moved out. Occasionally, we'd discuss an interesting news story as we ate, so when I flipped the page and saw the article about a man being found dead in a local cheap hotel, it intrigued me. I read it, noting an all-too-familiar name. I read all the details with an intense fascination to see if it could be the man I thought it was. It did seem possible, however. He was a former co-worker of my wife, so I needed to ask her if it was possibly him. According to this article, a man was found dead in a hotel room last night. His name was Darren Scott. Didn't you used to work with a Darren Scott, dear? Juanita made a noise as she took a sharp intake of breath. Yes, a few years ago, but it might not be the same person. She forced herself to be calmer. The paper says he was 34 and lived across town on Drury Lane with his wife and 3 kids. Does that sound like him? Yes. Yes, it does, she replied, a little more nervous. Does it say how he died? Yes, he was in room 32 of the Seaside Motel, you know, that rundown motel. He was tied to the bed and had been badly hurt. The police think it may have been the work of a jealous person, but are not ruling out. Juanita had covered her mouth with her hand and ran from the kitchen towards the bathroom. I had a satisfied smirk on my face because Darren had gotten his. And now Juanita was reaping the emotions that run through your mind when it seems that a former friend of yours was brutally hurt by someone thought to be a jealous person. My mind rolled back over our life together. We met just out of college. I was hanging with some friends in a bar, and she was there with some of her friends. Juanita wasn't the prettiest one of the bunch, but by far not the ugliest. My friends slowly paired up with her group, and we ended up chatting, and one thing led to another. 17 months later, we were married. We had a normal marriage, a few ups and downs, a son, Brian, after a year, and a daughter, Amber, 2 years after that. They are both married, and one lives in a town an hour away, while my son lives about 3 hours away in the other direction. We lived our lives making time for baseball games, basketball games, piano lessons, and other after-school activities. Neither of the kids were good enough to get a scholarship, so we were still paying off their student loans and would be for the next 7 years, which kept us on a fairly tight budget. Neither Juanita nor I worked jobs that required much travel or overtime, so we knew where the other one was, because we were usually at home with the kids, doing things as a family. So, there we are. I'm Jack and 47 to Juanita's 46, and we're still in decent shape. She says I look better now than I did when we met. I think the same of her, as the few pounds she added to the curves in all the right places. It was only a week ago on Wednesday that I was rummaging through the junk drawer in my wife's dresser, looking for the sewing kit to fix a seam in my lucky bowling shirt, when I saw a red leather-bound book. It had the words "Dear Diary" on the front, and I couldn't believe that Juanita still kept her old diary from when she was young. I wondered if it covered the time when we met and what she had to say about me. I cautioned myself that it may not be very flattering, as I was more infatuated with her than her with me at first. I was shocked when the date on the top of the first page was March 15th, 2011, only 2.5 years ago. My curiosity piqued. I began to read how a younger English coworker of hers, a Darren Scott, had begun to flirt a lot with her. She was concerned that he may be trying to get her attention, but wrote that will never happen. She noted that as a mid-40s woman, it made her feel young and attractive again, and she didn't realize how much she missed that kind of excitement in her life. She wrote that the reason for this diary was that she was bursting at the seams to tell someone about this, but she couldn't tell anyone because several of her friends had shared stories about flirting at work, and she always told them it was a bad idea. Obviously, she couldn't confide in her husband on this subject, hence the diary. She promises herself to keep it light and never let things go too far. Over the next few weeks, she laments that her children don't need her anymore, and it was only going to be worse after Amber got married and moved away. She also commented that I'm as boring as staring at a picture of a white cow in a snowstorm. She notes that I joined a Wednesday night bowling league recently, and she hardly notices when I'm not there. She complains that if this is all she has to look forward to in life, she'll just go crazy. I looked up from the book and rhetorically asked aloud, why didn't she say something to me? I had no idea it was so bad for her. I'll have to think of something to spice things up a bit. Then I went back to reading, and my mood went from sympathetic and sad to angry and hurt. She began to rationalize how having a one-time adventure with Darren would add a little spice to her life. She added that I could benefit as well. She had other reasons, which were all nonsense of course, why she should do it, but just once. Finally, she decided that if she was very careful and discreet, she could do this daring act for our benefit and not get caught. They planned and agreed to meet at the Seaside Motel, room 32, after taking the afternoon off. She had all these romantic notions of how this and that would be. Reality had a rude awakening planned for her. We don't live in an immaculate home, as we were the neighborhood home where all the kids came over to play. Our home was usually cluttered with toys, video games, sports equipment, or whatever they were doing that day. The kids would pick it up, of course, but keeping the neighborhood playhouse spotless would have taken too much time from being with our family. We were clean, but not Mr. Clean. Room 32 of the Seaside Motel, which was about 30 years past its prime, was far below even our definition of a clean hotel room. Juanita immediately began to worry about bugs, and if the sheets were replaced after the last guests. She was very detailed and descriptive of this event. She went home, showered, and cried for the rest of the afternoon. When Jack came home, she wrote, he asked why I was so sad, which she blamed on Amber's moving out after the upcoming wedding. She felt bad lying to me, but couldn't let me know how she betrayed our vows, and especially how she'd gotten so little in return. She commented that she got what she deserved out of the affair, and vowed that she'd never do it again. She couldn't stand the thought of how much she could have hurt me by what she'd done. She promised to turn over a new leaf and be a better wife to me, in every way she could think of, including adding an occasional surprise. She noted that she hadn't done anything special for me in close to 5 years. Pretty close. It was on our 20th anniversary when we stayed at a fancy hotel suite. She was going to be more attentive and fix my favorite meals more often. She was determined to make it up to me. How great. She cheated on me, and I remembered how she was so good to me, like she described, during all the chaos in the months before Amber's wedding. When I complimented her on it, she said that she was caught up in the romance of the wedding and wanted me to know how much she loved and appreciated me. She was just trying to relieve her guilt. Well, at least she learned her lesson. Or had she? I read on. Being the concerned husband that I am, I folded the paper, put it on the breakfast table, and went to check on her. By that time, she was sitting on the edge of our bed with a tissue. So I can assume by your reaction that it was the same guy? I didn't think you knew him all that well. How close were you? I asked, trying to understand. He was just a guy that worked with us for a while. He wasn't the nicest guy in the office, but he didn't deserve that kind of death. I was thinking of his wife and kids as well. They didn't deserve that. From what the article implied, he was a serial flirt, and the list of suspects is as long as your arm if they can ever find them all. What they didn't deserve was a father and husband like that. Now his wife can find someone who truly cares for her, like I've cared for you and our kids all these years. I used the phrase truly cares, and from the shiver she made when I said it, the meaning was not lost on her. Since you seem to be all right, I'm off to work. I leaned over and gave her a peck on the cheek since her head was still lowered where she couldn't look me in the eye. There was a happy spring in my step for the 5th time in a week as I went to work that day. Ain't karma a pain? Juanita noticed the light steps as I left and made a mental note to keep a closer eye on me, wondering if I knew anything about their friendship, if you could call that one afternoon disaster a friendship. Chapter 2. It was Thursday morning again, and gradually we had settled back into our routine. I no longer noticed the sidelong glances Juanita gave me occasionally as we watched television for several days after what happened last week. A few more leaves had fallen from the trees in our backyard. Juanita commented, "The weather is supposed to be good Saturday, so you need to get some of those leaves raked up before they get too deep." "I agree," I said as I sat down in my chair and picked up the paper. I already had it on my schedule this weekend. "How was your bowling game last night?" "It was late when you got home and I was too tired to stay up any longer." "I did okay with a score of 225, 178, and a 231. We won by only 3 points, so we held on to second place. Sorry about it being late, but it was Jeff's birthday and we stayed to have a few sodas with him." I unfolded the paper, and on the bottom of the front page there was an article of another man found dead. The headline was, "Serial Killer Feared." I quickly scanned it with much interest as it was very similar to the one last week. Geez, I can't believe that it happened again. Listen to this. They found another man killed similar to your friend. This time, he was found in his apartment, though. He was harmed again, and this time they put it somewhere uncomfortable. What do you make of that, dear? That's terrible. Did this guy have a family? She anxiously asked. No, he was a single guy named Thomas Reardon. He lived close to where you work on Bleecker Street. Did you know him? She made a mad dash for the bathroom. I smirked again, probably a little bigger this time, but no one was around to see it. As I continued to read her diary, she detailed more of what she did to feel better after her mistake, and then noted that since I was totally clueless, that she should back off before she raised my suspicions. She then had plenty to write about as the wedding approached. Shortly after the wedding, the entries became more ordinary and sporadic to the point where there were only 2 in the whole month of August. I was about to give up when they began to mention another man, recently divorced, was giving her compliments, a pattern I recognized, but she didn't seem to. Maybe he was slower and more subtle than Darren had been. Yes, Thomas Reardon entered my wife's life, and after less of a struggle with her conscience this time, since she'd gotten away clean and paid her dues. It was early October when he was first mentioned, as well as how young and desirable he made her feel. He even brought her a flower for her desk a few times. She told him that she'd have to tell everyone that Jack sent it to her, or rumors would fly. He was okay with that, as she deserved them no matter who got the credit for sending them. Smooth guy. By Halloween, she'd agreed to meet him for a one-time hangout at his apartment. He lived nearby on Bleecker Street, and they could make it there for a quick snack without taking any more time off that she'd have to account for later. This time, he was trying for an extended relationship, so he put in a lot of effort. He had soft music playing and candles burning in his darkened bedroom. She reminded him that it was just a once-in-a-lifetime thing, but with less determination than before they had spent time together. I looked up from the darn book. She used the term spent time together. They didn't do things like she did with Darren. They spent time together. I was already in an angry, confused state about her getting involved with a second person, but this spending time together took the cake. They had another meetup on Tuesday of the next week, but it wasn't all lovey-dovey like the first 2 meetings. She hoped that if she gave a little, she'd get a little. On later meetups, it became part of their routine. She went on to comment that this became a full-fledged relationship that was supposed to be a short thing, and she regretted that, but she didn't regret the lovey-dovey moments and the wonderful feelings she had for their first few meetings, until he became controlling and obsessed. In her guilt, she says that she considered doing something special for Jack as part of the atonement process, but feared that it might make him suspicious to offer it to him after vehemently refusing it for all these years. She said, all it should take this time would be a couple of favors and one of my famous home-cooked meals, and it will all be okay. Last time I almost overdid it. After all, now I've had 2 boyfriends and he is still completely clueless. LOL. She was cracking up at the way I'd loved and trusted her. I felt the urge to get rid of the bad feelings. I got up from the table after finishing my breakfast to check on Juanita. She was still in front of the toilet on the floor. I grabbed a washcloth and dampened it for her. She took it when I offered it to her and wiped her mouth. Do you think you might have the flu? Or did you eat something last night that disagreed with you? I think I'll be okay, Jack. It's just so horrible how he was killed. So, you did know him. The paper said that he was a serial flirt also, and they fear a pattern might be developing. They interviewed his ex-wife, and she said that it was just a matter of time before a jealous partner caught up to him. I guess he had a long list of wronged partners after him, too. Maybe the cops will shorten the list when they see any overlap between the 2. Say you used to work with him too. Did you know anyone who both of them might have been involved with? Maybe you should call the cops and... She interrupted me. I didn't know either one of them all that well to know who they'd been with. She replied in a panic. Composing herself, she continued, I couldn't be of any help to the police. Okay, but if you could help them find the killer with any little detail, you might be able to prevent another cheating jerk from being killed. Wait, maybe that's not such a bad thing. Babe? That's a terrible thing to say, Jack. No one deserves to die like that. Surely you're not defending these low-life, self-centered jerks, are you? I mean, if I thought for one quick minute that those guys had done anything with you, well, all I can say is that they got off easy. I'd have had to teach them a lesson and let them know exactly why they deserve to pay before I'd let them enter the next world. No, of course I'm not defending them. It just seems so unnecessarily brutal, that's all. If you're saying that you'd have made them suffer first, then you're scaring me, Jack. I've never known you to be violent like that. That's because no one has ever betrayed me like that before. And I truly hope you never have to find out just how much that thought upsets me. I've got to go to work. Do you think you'll go in? Or are you going to take today off? I'll be okay soon. I feel much better now. Well, you haven't gotten sick like that since you had Amber. This isn't morning sickness, is it? I joked, or did I? Oh, wait. You have to be close before you can conceive, and we haven't been close in over 2 months. Wow. I didn't realize that it has been that long until I just now thought about it. It was Labor Day weekend, wasn't it? We'll have to fix that soon, babe? The guilt on her face was obvious. She didn't realize that she had me turned off for that long, in light of what was going on. Actually, I'd had her turned off for the couple weeks since I made my discovery. She just didn't realize it. Gotta go, hope you get to feeling better. See, yeah. I left without even attempting a hug. Chapter 3. It took almost the whole week until the next Wednesday night for Juanita to stop giving me suspicious looks. She must have finally convinced herself that since they were both unfaithful jerks, it was just a coincidence that they were both killed and harmed. Maybe the second murder was inspired by the first one. Thursday morning arrived, and so did our breakfast meeting. After the last 2 Thursdays, she was dreading it, but I was looking forward to it. As I entered, she started off right away with, "You were late getting home from bowling last night. That's 2, or is it 3 weeks in a row? You're not doing anything you shouldn't, are you?" Do anything wrong? You have to be kidding me. I'm as boring as looking at a picture of an albino cow in a blizzard. I wondered if she would recognize her own words. No, I had a great night last night, and it was enough to move us into first place. I bowled a 235, a 221, and then a 297. It was amazing. Joe did great too, and the rest of the team did about what they usually do. We moved into first place by 10 pins. We stayed a little while to celebrate. I'm sorry that I didn't call you first. Just think, if that last ball had curved a bit the other way, you could have read about my first perfect game in the paper today. Speaking of the paper, oh, there it is. She still gave me a few questioning looks as I read. I opened it up, and right in the middle of page 1 was a picture from the murder scene of the police spokesperson trying to assure everyone that the killer would be caught and soon. I read the details and told Juanita, the lady killer has struck again. That's what they're calling him now. It's definitely the same person, they say. This time the guy was parked in his car by the lake, in a popular spot for couples. I lowered the paper to see fear in her eyes. His name was Manny Trabajo. She screamed and ran into our bedroom. I smiled again. After her second affair ended, she didn't have as much guilt, so less was written about how she tried to make it up to me, because she didn't do much at all. Mostly, her comments were about how good the first few times were, and how surprised she was that she hadn't been able to control herself and keep it to just one time, as she'd planned. The entries became less frequent again, until late March, when another young man showed interest in my loving wife. It only took him 10 days to convince her to meet him for lunch in his car. They parked in a makeout spot near the marina, and they ate a quick lunch. Then they made out, and it made her feel like a teenager again. She hadn't been a makeout queen or promiscuous in high school, but she had her first 2 relationships before she graduated, so this was not her first time in this type of situation. By their 3rd date, he had shown her how to lay the passenger seat back so they could be close right there. She did her best to compose herself for the afternoon at work, but she still worried that someone might notice. She checked herself carefully on the drive back to work. She wrote, "I have gotten away with it again, so I promise to be a better wife. Yeah, right, LOL. I have the best of both worlds. A caring partner at home and an exciting encounter once or twice a year to break up the monotony. I'm just sorry that the fun and excitement doesn't last longer because it really makes me feel young and attractive. Ancient. I wonder how long it will take me to find another lover." I followed her. After I had eaten, of course. There's no point in letting a perfectly good breakfast get cold. She was composing herself after crying when I walked in. She heard me and looked up. I saw complete fear in her eyes. Could she actually think that I was killing off her lovers and that she might be next? If she did, I could only laugh silently at her. I take it from your reaction that you knew the victim of last night's killing, too. Shit, that's 3 for 3 with you. Why do you know all these flirtatious jerks well enough to feel sorry for them? Why do you? It seemed like a light bulb had turned on in my head. Please tell me that you didn't have anything going on with these guys. I don't know how you could even think such a thing. Are you accusing me of what? Having a relationship with those losers? What are you trying to say, Jack? Her rapid change in tone made it seem planned. I'm not accusing you. I just thought it was a crazy coincidence that you knew all three of those assholes. I was just teasing you. I know that you love and respect me way too much to risk our amazing years together over a few moments of forbidden good time with those cheating jerks. I was just surprised that you seemed upset about them. It's not them, it's how brutal the murders are. Then why didn't you get upset until after I read his name? You were sitting there completely calm until I said Manny Trabajo. That's what made you lose it. She looked away, it was building up, and I was silently asking God that it should be a total stranger this time. When I realized that my company does business with his company, and I've seen him in the office a few times, I guess I couldn't handle it. It's not like I knew him well, but it happened to someone I know. I guess that makes sense. Maybe I should ask you, since you thought I might have been involved with them, if you killed them. She raised her head to look into my eyes. My dear, I said, giving her a peck on top of her head, if I thought you had been unfaithful with one man, let alone 3 men, you wouldn't be sitting here asking me questions. I have to go. Bye. I walked out of the room knowing that the knife had been twisted in a little further. I laughed most of the way to work as I replayed the scenes in my head. Chapter 4. This Wednesday night, Juanita waited up for me to come home from bowling, which I did about 11:15. It was a bit later than normal, but not as late as the previous weeks. It's not like she could sleep anyway, as her nerves were on edge. After all, over the last 3 Wednesdays, 3 of her ex-boyfriends were harmed, in the order of their relationships with her. Each of them was injured in the same place they had their first date, and had something meaningful to them taken away. Darren, who was mean to the husband, had his favorite hat stolen. Thomas, who loved adventure, had his backpack taken, and Manny, who enjoyed writing, had his notebook burned. And to make things worse, the police suspected that her husband was the one responsible. Juanita checked him very carefully as he walked through the door. Jack had beer on his breath, but no sign of anything suspicious. Why are you still awake, dear? You're usually fast asleep by now. Do you feel guilty about something? Did you spend too much money on clothes this week? I asked. No, I didn't spend too much money this week on anything. I had a little stomach ache, that's all. How was your bowling tonight? I'd rather not talk about it, I grumbled. I have an early meeting tomorrow, so I'm going to bed. Within 10 minutes, she thought I was sleeping soundly. She thought, how ironic that I would think that, considering I believe he somehow discovered my past relationships and is targeting my exes on Wednesdays, while he's supposed to be bowling and ruining their sentimental items. But if he actually knew, why hasn't he confronted me? Why hasn't he kicked me out? Or at least called me names? It's like he becomes a completely different person who knows and harms, but then forgets about that other side for the rest of the time. I don't understand how he could possibly do that. He doesn't seem any different than normal ... I'm sure he doesn't know. He can't know and sleep like that. It would be destroying him ... eating away at him. If he knew, I have, to act normal and not give anything away about my little flings. I have to be brave. She rolled over and closed her eyes, determined to get some rest. Just as she started to drift off, I twitched and she thought she heard me mumble something like, "Go away, ex-boyfriend, go away." Her eyes widened at this point, and she realized that sleep would be elusive. I was facing away from her, eyes closed and a big smirk on my face. Thursday morning came again, and Juanita looked like she hadn't slept all night. But Jack was wide awake. The leaves on the trees were almost entirely gone. They sat down at the table, and she asked him again, "How was your bowling last night, dear?" I already told you I don't want to talk about it, but if you insist, he snapped. I did terrible, and we slipped back into second place. My worst game was actually a 187. We had a team meeting to figure out how I could improve. That's all. I'm sorry to hear that. I know how much you enjoy bowling. You'll do better next week, I'm sure of it. She sat at the table and he commented, "Wow, you look like you didn't sleep a wink all night. Are you feeling okay?" I already told you I had a stomach ache last night, honey. It might have been something you ate. You better be careful with your food. If it keeps bothering you, maybe you should see a doctor. I'll keep an eye on it. Okay, let's see what's in the news this morning. He picked up the newspaper and she anxiously waited for any news about another victim of the mysterious ruiner, because damn it, she had another ex-boyfriend. Jack stayed silent for a few tense moments. Just when she thought there were no crimes last night, he broke the silence. Well, it happened again. Another man found defeated in his office, uncovered on his desk. What do you think about that, dear? I honestly have no idea what it could mean. Why would you even ask me that? Because I remember that your company was involved with his company a few months ago, so I'm sure you met him. His name is Richard Mellingham. Juanita fainted and slowly slid out of her chair onto the floor. Jack smirked as he watched her collapse. He finished his breakfast as if everything was completely normal. He stepped over her lifeless body as he grabbed the last piece of bacon. His mind flashed back to another part of her diary, describing how her company won a bid for the Mellingham account, and she would be working closely with the boss's son, Richard, who was the vice president of marketing. She wondered if she would find her next best friend there. It turned out that Richard would become her lover, even though he was the oldest of all her partners at the ancient age of 39, just 8 years younger than me, compared to the much younger men before him. She told him that he flirted a lot, but she believed they could figure out a way to both benefit. He responded by locking the door to his office and promptly clearing his desk of all the papers with a single sweep of his arm. How romantic, just like in the movies. They met up several times a week, but reserved special moments when they could be alone in the office, right before lunch, and have exclusive time together. Eventually, she would grow tired of these flings and only want me to take care of her in her later years. Her rant continued, I'm the best wife he could ask for. After all, I've had 4 flings and ended them without Jack suspecting a thing. He doesn't pay attention to me anymore, so I have to find that somewhere else. I wonder who my next friend will be. Maybe someone with a British accent. Wouldn't that be fun and romantic? Maybe he'll look like a celebrity. I can hardly wait to find out. Juanita slowly regained consciousness on the kitchen floor. When she saw the newspaper on the table, she remembered why she was there. That meant I had harmed 4 ex-boyfriends. She had run out of exes. Where was Jack? How long had she been out? Did he just leave her there and go to work? That would mean he had lost all his love for her and must know about her past flings. Just then, Jack walked into the kitchen with a wet towel and handed it to her. How long was I out? Just long enough for me to grab this towel for you. It seems like you've harmed all 4 of his victims now. It's starting to seem like quite the coincidence, isn't it, baby? And that's all it is, a coincidence. Are you sure you don't know anything that could help the police find the person responsible for these crimes? I'm sure they'd appreciate any information I ask playfully. I'm sure I don't know anything. Just leave me alone, calm down. I was just kidding with you. If you can't take a joke, you're going to have one heck of a time putting up with me in our retirement. You need to make an effort, too. It's not like you'll be spending your golden years with Brad Pitt. I patted her on the top of her head as I left for work, smirking all the way there. Chapter 5. Juanita had been tired from lack of sleep and jumpy all week. Every little sudden noise set her off, even the furnace kicking on did it once. Jack had been behaving blissfully normal, except for the fact that he hadn't initiated any moments for the last 4 weeks, 1 week before her former partners began to meet unfortunate fates. After he left for work on Wednesday, she began to think about it all. Could he know about my affairs? She wondered. She knew him to be a passionate man from their years together. There's no way he'd do nothing if he knew. He'd confront me, or I'd come home and find all my clothes on the front lawn. Maybe he's gathering evidence, and he only suspects something. If he only suspected, then why has he been hinting that I might know something and that I should go to the cops, especially if he could be involved in their deaths? None of this makes any sense. I just wish I knew what was going on in his head. One thing is for sure, I'm following him to that darn bowling alley tonight, just to make sure. Just then, her cell phone rang, and it was her current partner, Hugo Long. Hey there, I'm really looking forward to tonight. Is he still on for bowling? Yes, he is, but I'm not sure that getting together tonight is such a good idea. I think he may know more than what he's letting on. Maybe we'd better cool it for a while. I'm sure you're just being paranoid. If it'll make you feel better, we'll make sure that he goes bowling, and then we'll start our party. I'll watch for him to leave, and I'll pick you up and we'll follow him to the bowling alley. Once he's inside, we'll rush back home and get the party started. You know you can't wait to be together again. You know you crave each other. I guess you're right, Hugo. I was thinking along the same lines. Her better judgment was clouded by the thoughts of how great it felt to be together. This would be the 5th time they met up, and it was showing no signs of slowing down. The romance had gone, but the feeling of being completely connected completely overshadowed any thoughts of missing the romance. She pondered that she should have found someone sooner, as being together was totally amazing. He usually leaves about 5:45, so be down the block by 5:30. I can't wait, she added in an excited voice. I'll be there, don't you worry. As soon as I see him leave, we'll take off after him. He won't recognize my car, so we won't have to follow too closely. It's a date. I can't wait to be with you again. I can't wait either. See you tonight. Just like they planned, they followed him to the alley and he casually went inside, unaware that anything was happening. They waited across the street for a couple minutes to see if he came back out, which he didn't, and they rushed back to her house. Hurry, she exclaimed. I want you to be with me. He has no clue about us, and it excites me to do it right under his nose and not get caught. He's so unaware. I knew he was silly to let a lovely person like you out of his sight. You deserve better than someone who pays more attention to bowling of all things. 90 minutes later, a satisfied Juanita said it was time to clean up and she got in the shower. When she came out, she gasped at the scene before her. Hugo was still lying in bed, with a large knife sticking from his chest, his lifeless eyes staring at the ceiling, blood covering the sheets. She fainted. When she woke, she was flat on her back on the bed. I apologize for not introducing myself earlier, but you passed out before I could. My name is Herbert, he spoke in a calm, creepy voice. I met your husband many years ago when I was in the hospital. He was visiting a sick friend and I was under the doctor's care, shall we say. You see, I was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, or as laymen call it, I'm a sociopath. I was not making any progress until Jack came that day and showed me how to be a nice guy and the benefits of being one. We became fast friends and he visited me often, with my shrink's blessing. I can honestly say that it was because of Jack that I was rehabilitated enough to be released back into society, and until recently, my APD has never been a problem. I got a good job when I got out of school and got transferred to California where I was doing quite well for myself. Then, my cheating ex left me, and my job was eliminated in a merger. I came back here to stay with my parents after my cash ran out. It was a bad time for me, but I still dealt with my problems like a normal person. 4 weeks ago today, I was in a bowling alley listening to a band when I saw my friend and savior, Jack, sitting at the bar, looking heartbroken. After some talking, he told me the whole story of finding your diary that day and reading it about your 4 affairs, and he added that a 5th one may have started that very day. I was shocked. There's no way a nice guy like Jack deserved such treatment. I vowed that he would be avenged and he would never know anything about who was doing it or why. His karma would be untouched, and it would seem like those people's karma had caught up with them. I consoled him, and then I probed him for more information, like that he bowled every Wednesday night, and where he'd found your diary. I broke into your house and read your diary that next day while you both were at work. I made a copy and used all the information in it to track down and plot revenge on those people that felt they could break a marriage. I caused harm to one of your partners each. Wednesday night for the last 4 weeks, while Jack was bowling so he'd have witnesses for his alibi. Since each of these people was a repeat offender, I figured the cops wouldn't be able to figure out who did it, because the list would be quite long for each one. The nice part of being a sociopath is that I don't have the conscience that most people have, which causes guilt. Tonight, I will get back at you for the last time. When I leave, I will turn on your ceiling fan. Please notice the cloth string tied to one of the blades. I have calculated that it will run for almost 6 minutes when that string is exhausted from the cardboard roll it's on, and will pull those papers from your nightstand onto the space heater, causing a fire. If the authorities do an investigation, they will find no trace of the string, as it will burn completely away, as will the cloth binding you to that jerk here. They will think that you and that idiot knocked the papers off in the heat of an argument and were overcome by the smoke that you failed to notice while arguing. So tonight you will be in danger, and knowing that your obvious mistakes have caused the deaths of those 5 people who were dumb enough to mess around with a married woman, and yourself, an unfaithful person. I read your diary and you really are a horrible person, you know that? I can only imagine that Jack likes the news over the last few weeks. After all, each week a man he knows you hooked up with got what they deserved. Hey. I should apologize for the bad joke, Pete, but I really don't care what you think of me. I can only hope that he will agree with my decision that you suffer. After all, he is much better off without an untrustworthy person for a wife. We can all agree to that. He got up and walked to the door of their bedroom. It's time to say goodbye, as the upper floor needs to be on fire before someone calls the fire department, and I wouldn't want Jack to come home early and unknowingly call before all my evidence burns away and you suffer. So, goodbye. He flipped on the wall switch that started the fan, and a few seconds later she heard the back door close. She saw the string unwinding and began to panic. She struggled to get Hugo off of her and could only move her arms slightly. Just as Herbert predicted, 6 minutes later the fire began, and smoke filled the room. As the smoke filled her lungs, she noticed the light fading into darkness as she passed out for the last time. Epilogue. Jack was on his way home thinking how strange it was that as soon as he'd decided to gather evidence of her affairs and use it publicly against her in the divorce, that someone had begun to take revenge on her lovers. He regretted what it would do to his kids, but she had to face the consequences for her actions and the complete lack of respect she showed him. If all of them suffered, she had to be wondering if he did it and if she was next. It had to be really scaring her, and he could see it. It was with that thought in mind that he arrived home, to see the fire trucks putting out the fire at his house. Of course, at first the police looked closely at Jack, but there were so many people who could vouch for his whereabouts, as well as security tapes at the bowling alley. Then there was the fact that the lover's reputation was still intact, so they couldn't connect it to the other incidents. The authorities were thorough enough to investigate Jack's finances for the last few years, and they noted that he didn't have the kind of money it would take to hire someone to carry out these acts. They checked the alibis of his close friends and family during the incidents and came up with nothing. Jack even offered to take a lie detector test and passed with flying colors. Due to the whirlwind of emotions he was going through, Jack never connected Herbert's APD and the possibility that he could be the infamous lover's revenge seeker. They became closer since Herbert moved back into town and Jack was single. 30 years later, as Herbert was nearing the end of his cancer battle, he confessed to his friend. Jack bought him a drink. The cases are still unsolved,